Harvest isn't easy. Long hours, heavy loads, hard miles. But the work doesn't stop when the crop comes out. At Landis, we know next year's harvest is already in the making. It starts with choosing the right seed. It builds with acreage inputs that push your crop further. And it stays sharp with Sky Scout technology that finds issues before they cost you bushels. This isn't chance, it's planning, and it's what we do together. Talk to your Landis advisor or stop at your local Landis location today, and let's get next season started.
Welcome to Farm Year Daily, a Field Forward podcast. I'm your host, David Geiger. Today on Farm Year Daily, a look at the pace and surprises of harvest this year with Western Iowa agronomist Mike Witt with ISU Extension. Please be sure to like and follow the podcast as well as our social media at Field Forward Pod. We would love to have you join our community, keeping folks informed about what is affecting our farmers. This is Farm Year Daily. And joining me on Farm Year Daily, we're going to take a look over at the western side of the state of Iowa. Mike Witt, ISU Extension agronomist, joins us. Mike, it's been a few weeks since we've last spoken, and harvest is rolling out. It is going strong. We're going to see what those crop updates are going to be like later today, in fact. But in your part of the state, how's harvest treating you, and how you feeling so far?
Well, for us, harvest has really been moving along at a very good click. So one of the big issues that we've had is just that it's been so warm and so dry that we're running into some issues when it comes to that, as far as there's a lot of dust that is coming out in that. And the other issue that it's causing is that rapid dry down has caused a lot of, shall we say, farmers to think they know where their moisture is on their crops, but in reality, it's actually drier than they thought it would be, especially with soybeans. We have some cases out there where there are some greener or yellowish stems out there, and then we look in those pods and we're at that 9% moisture, if not even a little more on some of those. So, which is not where we want to be when it comes to that. So again, there's some of the issues we're dealing with out there, but then I say that in one hand, and then in the other hand, I'll say we have some that aren't near as mature and are still drying down and are still have corn in that above 20% moisture. So we're all over the board when it comes to a lot of that.
I want to mention this before I forget, but I recall across many other parts of the state, there was a bit of concern about the moisture and the later growth of some of the soybeans going on. And I was thinking that might be cause for something that might be really chewing up some of the combines rolling around, harvesters out there. Have you guys experienced more difficult than usual green type soybeans as you are out and about at harvest?
I wouldn't say necessarily we've seen more this year than we have in the past. It's just becoming more of a prevalent issue. And farmers really, the only way they can really do that is you've got to make sure you've got the correct equipment to be able to do that. Now, whether that's newer equipment or you make some adjustments to your rotors and things like that as you're going along, so that you just have to make those adjustments on the fly to kind of deal with a little bit of that heavier residue that's coming through there. So that's really what farmers are having to do when it comes to that. And again, a lot of times farmers are still using the visual cues of, well, those plants look a little bit greener. Maybe I should wait a little bit longer to take them out, which again can lead to some issues. But at the end of the day, that's a lot of the methodologies that they're still using.
Well, using that point and going back to your earlier point about how we're seeing some drier than expected moisture content for some of the crop, how best do you recommend or do you hear to work with that to test it in scouting as folks are walking around their fields?
Yeah, what I really tell farmers to do is to go out, whether it's a handheld grain moisture tester, or another way to do that would be, again, take a sample, take it into the co-op or things along those lines, just so you have an idea of what your field is if you're not sure. And that's where really farmers need to come out and look. A lot of times they will just have enough fields that they need to do that they'll be like, well, this one's ready, that one I'm not sure of, so we'll just move to the next. But going out and getting an accurate measurement of where that moisture is from a random spot in the field or a spot that's more representative of the field, not just the first 5 feet in the field because that's where we want to walk because we don't want to walk across the field. But making sure we get a good representative sample of what we're looking at there can really help you in determining, well, maybe this field can wait a little bit. Maybe we need to get on this one and really get a plan of attack for all those fields that you're out there harvesting.
As you look at what is going on at the moment in terms of harvest, what is some of the surprising sides that you're seeing out? You mentioned the moisture. Are you seeing any other surprising sides of what is going on out there in the fields right now?
Well, one surprise that I think I've noticed this year especially is there is a very large spread and variability with hybrids and varieties out there in the field. We're really able to see some hybrids that are going to shine and really have enjoyed the weather and the weather patterns this year and are going to be having very, very high yields out there. I would say, 10, 15 bushels, maybe above normal county averages out there for some of those fields. And if you have those hybrids, you're going to be very, very happy. But then we're also seeing some out there in varieties as well that may be below that county average. And it's really a lot of that variability is really showing through on there. And that comes to a lot of factors with the weather as well as just, we're a little bit different this year than we have been in the past. So you might have been making selection. And what I mean by that is in the near past, we've had really dry conditions. Well, this year we had more moisture conditions until the end of the season. So if you would have been able to, we'll say, play that gamble correctly and hit those numbers, as we like to say, for your varieties and your hybrids, then yeah, you're going to see a lot of success. And others are not going to be very poor. They just won't be as happy as they would like to be, is what I would like to say.
I thought about this when you were speaking about the moisture levels and scouting as well. But we've seen an advent of new technology, especially in drones and aerial surveillance of fields. Are we able to better check some of the moisture levels of our crops by taking a look at some heat maps and some of the things from up above?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that you're able to tell the moisture of the crop, but you would be able to tell some of the maturity aspects of it. And
Right.
Where that would really come into play would be, especially in corn. Soybeans, you can usually see across the fields as you're looking out there, but corn, you might not be able to see across the fields. And as you're driving, you might be able to say, well, hey, the outside rows look really good and ready to harvest. But if you throw up that drone, you can look at the inside areas and say that, you know what, those really aren't ready to go. So that's where if you have your own drone, you could utilize that to possibly look at some of that maturation, but not necessarily the grain yield.
This is Farm Here Daily. We will continue the conversation in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at the marketplace. And there was a mixed trading session at the close for Monday. December corn 2 3/4 cents higher, 4.21 3/4, with March rising 2.5 cents at 4.38 1/4. Soybeans in November, 1/4 penny down at 10.17 3/4, with January falling 1.25 pennies at 10.35 3/4. Soybean meal in December, $1.50 a ton, in the red, $277.10. Soybean oil in December, 1/3 penny higher at 50.38 a pound. December wheat, 2.5 cents down, 5.12 3/4, with March a decrease of 2 1/4, 5.30 1/4. Hard red winter wheat in December, 1.5 pennies down, 4.95 1/2, with March a decrease of 1.5 pennies at 5.17. In the livestock market close for Monday, October live cattle up 85 cents a hundredweight, $231.87. December rising $2.17 at $236.67. Feeder cattle in October, $5.22 a hundredweight stronger at $362.40, with November $5.37 in the green, $360.80. Lean hogs in December down 2 cents a hundredweight, $87.27, with February 25 cents higher at $89.55 a hundredweight. That is the Monday market close. This is Farm Here Daily. Mike, let's go over some targets of what folks are talking about over in Western Iowa. I was looking at last week's harvest progress. We were a couple days ahead of normal. How is western Iowa and your parts? And do you think we are headed towards a quicker than normal harvest, or is this recent weather, a little bit wetter, going to put a stop to that?
Well, I will always caveat this. If I knew what Mother Nature was going to do, I would be on a boat somewhere and be making a lot of money. But so what I will say is we are ahead of schedule right now. And if I look at weather forecasts, they are calling for, again, probably a warmer October. So even though right now we are sitting there, we are getting some cooler weather, we are going to get some rain. To me, I look at that as a blessing for farmers to take a breath. They'll be like, okay, we're going to have to take a break for a little bit. Let's fix those things we had stuck together with duct tape. Let's make sure we get everything where we need to be so that when this next round comes up, we can go out and we can go strong again. So as far as overall timing, I think we will probably end up staying a little bit ahead of schedule. If we get some of those warmer temperatures to go forward into October, I think we will just keep on moving when it comes to that. But again, if Mother Nature throws us a curveball and all of a sudden we get cold and wet for 2.5, 3 weeks, which it is Iowa, so we can have that, then we're going to end up being a little bit more towards the average or the other side of it. But as it sits right now, I feel like we'll be able to keep on moving.
Mike, let's take a look at some of the specialties of the agronomists at Iowa State University and talk about end of season pest pressures or concerns. Are you seeing anything in your fields, or are things going relatively well?
Well, honestly, pest pressure in corn and soybeans, I'm not seeing a lot. But what I have been seeing, getting a lot of telephone calls on, is fall armyworm pressure in pastures as well as late season alfalfa fields and things like that. Fall armyworms came in with these warmer temperatures and they have decimated a lot of fields and a lot of pastures out there. And really what they have done is they've clipped it all the way down to the ground. So there's folks out there that are looking at it going, wow, what's happening? Or is this going to recover? And a lot of times it can recover and it just looks like you've clipped it down there. And one of the biggest issues is you can go out and spray for these army worms, but the problem is a lot of times by the time they've done their damage, they're big enough that you can't really recover anything from that. So a lot of times the best thing to do is go out and harvest that alfalfa, even if it's a little sooner than you want to get it down so that we can do that. And with pastures, you just got to kind of ride that one out and then watch them regrow the next year.
Absolutely. And kind of on the same veins, are there any weeds that you're watching for at this time of the season to keep in mind of for next year, or advice you give on that front?
So with weeds, the big thing is this is actually the best time of year to scout how well your herbicide program was from the previous year. You're out there in the combine. If you get out in the middle of somewhere and you see a bunch of weeds that are going through your combine, combines are by far the best weed seeders we have of anything out there. They do an amazing job at spreading weed seeds. So if you have a lot of water hemp, especially out in your fields or other places like that, that you're like, man, I didn't know that was there, file that away, because that could be a spot where you could either have some resistance or there was some issue that came on with that. And remember that for the next spring, because you might think, well, you know, I'm just out here harvesting now, I won't remember. But in springtime, be like, where was that one spot where I had all those weed issues? I can't remember now because it's all flat and there's nothing out there. So again, remember some of those things when it comes to those weed issues that we've got. Also, sudden death syndrome, SDS. If you had SDS come in this year, those pockets and patches usually tend to grow and get bigger. Again, file that away for in 2 years from now. If you go back to soybeans in those areas, be like, I saw SDS increase in there. I might need to think about a little bit of proactive, put some seed treatments and other things in there for that so that you can be ready for the next upcoming years. Because even though this year is just about in the books, you take what you learned and you apply it for the next couple years, and we just keep trying to improve every year.
Going back to your point of weed seed spreading, call me crazy. I recall seeing some technology over the last few years of folks basically trying to advertise a box that goes onto the harvesters out there and captures those weed seeds more efficiently. Am I misremembering that? Or if it is something you've seen, do you know how well that has been working for producers in your area?
Yeah, so you're mostly right, except for the capture, they go with destruction. So a lot of times
Destruction, right.
what they'll have is they'll have some hammer mills or other things that are in there. So as those seeds are going through, it will devitalize that seed and really kind of crush that up before it goes out there. And what we have seen that does do a very good job of reducing that weed seed population and a lot of that. But one of the biggest issues that I've seen when it comes to those, which shouldn't be an issue, but tends to be an issue with farmers, is a lot of times with those attachments, you may need to slow down your harvest so that the material going through the machine goes through at a little bit slower pace so you can really get that chewed up. And again, slowing down is not something that a lot of folks want to do when it comes to those things. We could, but that's one of the things that I've seen going on with them. But as far as their functionality goes, they do a great job of reducing some of that seed bank.
Absolutely. When you only got so much time to get stuff in before a rain pops up, that I can understand the bit of the hurry. But that's good to know. Maybe slow down a little bit and prevent some weeds for next year. Save yourself a headache. I guess as a kind of final thought, since we are entering October, harvest is, oh gosh, I wouldn't be surprised if there were pockets with 50% or more done this week, based on last week's numbers, if not way more in some spots. But as you take a look at this year as a whole, are there any, I guess, from this point, 2020 hindsight points that you like to think about at the moment?
I guess looking back across the year, if there was something that I would like to remind farmers of and that sort of thing, would be that there is a lot of variability. We have to try our best to maximize what we can, but understand we can't control everything. The commodity prices right now, nobody likes. Some of that economic scenarios, nobody likes. So we need to think about, when we're moving forward in the future, what are some of the things that we need to do? Maybe I put on a little bit of extra stuff this year that I didn't need. Maybe I didn't do soil testing, and I should do that to make sure I maximize my P&K efficiency and those things like that. Take what we've got from this year and move forward and be like, well, what do I need to do to maximize and learn from this year, and then go forward to next year and try to increase that profitability? Because it's always easy when economic times are great. Then you can do whatever when you have $6-7 corn. It doesn't really matter. But when we got to really think about some of these things moving forward, use what we learned, go back to years past, and kind of move forward where we're at.
Mike Witt is the extension agronomist for Western Iowa at Iowa State University. Thank you so much for joining us on Farm Your Daily, Mike, and I hope that you and the farmers that you work with all have a good rest of the harvest.
Thank you.
This is Farm Your Daily, a Field Forward podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Again, in order to continue to produce this type of local content, we would love to have you join our community. So please follow the podcast as well as our social media channels at Field Forward Pod. You can also find me on social media at Geiger Reports. Again, I am your host, David Geiger, and I'll be back again tomorrow, everybody.